Thank you guys for joining me, by the way. I just want to ask you one question before I do the introduction.
What?
Exactly. This is our third episode of Pilots Say What, where we hear what pilots have to say. My name is Zachary. I'll be hosting you today. I am new here to Thrust Flight a little bit. I am not a pilot. I'm not even a student, and that's why I have at least a CFI and a student pilot here with me that I can ask some questions to. That being said, I want you all to maybe introduce yourselves. I'd like to get to know a little bit about Tav and about how long you've been in the program, just so that we know who we're talking to.
All right, so I'm Tav. I started right around 11 months ago. I'm currently working on my CFII. It's been quite a fun journey. Enjoyed it quite a bit.
Nice. That's good to hear. And then, do you mind if I ask how old you are and how long you've been in Dallas? Anything like
I'm
that?
27. I was from Dallas originally. I lived in Oklahoma, went to school there, worked there for a while, decided I wanted to quit my job and start flight training.
That sounds like an awesome decision. I'm gonna want to know a lot more about that and
Right.
how that's been going.
Talk about that.
But okay, so how about you? Would you like to introduce yourself?
My name's Cole. I'm a flight instructor here at Thrust Flight. I was a ZTA student at one time as well, starting back in June of 2022. June of 22. Before that, I was a college student at Michigan State studying finance, and I decided flying airplanes would be a little more fun than working on spreadsheets all day.
You know, I've heard that a couple of times now from you guys, and even when I've done some testimonials, people are like, I had this job, but it seemed a lot more fun. I think that's something I'm liking about pilots so far. They do what they like, and I like people who do what they like. So, well, on this episode, we'll talk a little bit about student life, what it's like to be a CFI, and what I think I'm very interested in, and what I'm imagining viewers may be interested in, is how Thrust Flight tends to have a primary CFI and how that helps the student. So I think it all ties in together a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But you said you were working in Oklahoma and you had a job before and you quit your job. What led to you quitting your job?
Kind of like what Cole said, it's not every 6-year-old boy's dream to plug away at spreadsheets every single day until they turn 65. So worked for a big company in their finance department and got tired of doing that. It'll suck the life out of you almost. So
yeah, well, I hear you. Well, and so there was something that said, "Hey, I might want to be a pilot." How did that go?
I've always liked flying in the back of the plane, typically in the front half. I try to put myself there, but I don't know. Flying one day, I decided how cool it'd be if I got to actually fly one of those things because I've always liked them. I'd sit there, I'd listen to live ATC all the time, and look at jetphotos.net when I was a kid on my parents' dial-up internet.
So you had the interest long. It was a long-running interest.
I've always liked airplanes.
And you acted on the interest. You said, "I'm not interested over here. What's missing is some sort of interest. I'm gonna go ahead and make a pivot." That's really cool.
Definitely.
I'm gonna ask you about those resources as I try to dive into my aviation interests now that I work here.
Yeah, for sure.
Especially if I'm doing this podcast, I want to be able to hang in the conversation.
Oh yeah.
So that's cool though. And then you just kind of said, "Hey, I'm gonna quit the job. I'm gonna go to Dallas," and you found Thrust Flight.
Yeah, I woke up one morning. I was talking to my dad, and I was like, I think I'm going to quit my job and I want to do flight training.
Oh man, how did you take it?
He said, I don't know why you didn't do this sooner.
I guess it's a little easier of a conversation. I'm telling my dad, I'm like, "Hey dad, I want to make videos." And he's like, "Okay." But that's really cool. I'm glad that's something you made the choice to do. A lot of people don't make choices to change things that they don't like. So
it can be scary.
Cool. Exactly. And that's why I was going to ask you about the same thing. You made a similar choice.
So I was contemplating the whole thing even before I went to school to study business. Like Tav, I had an interest in it from when I was a kid, and it's actually really cool. Once I became a CFI and went through pilot training, my mom pulled out this time capsule from when I was 4, and I said I drew a picture of an airplane and said I wanted to do that.
Oh, that's freaking awesome.
So that was really cool. And so I went back and forth with the decision a lot. Why I didn't go to an aviation college? I was just looking at the numbers of it and saying, okay, I can go get a business degree, make some money, and pay half the cost in tuition as it would be to go to the likes of, your Western Michigan, Embry-Riddle, that kind of school.
Yeah.
I just wasn't sure at the time, and it took me ultimately to getting my private pilot license for me to figure out, wow, this is really cool. I like doing it. I'm good at it, I think.
Yeah.
And, the fact that you make a career out of this, it's pretty special.
Yeah, so you wanted to, but did you get your private pilot license with us?
No, I did not. So I started with my instrument rating at
Okay.
Thrust. I did my private pilot license, Part 61,
Okay.
when I was still in college. It was actually during the coronavirus summer, so it was the perfect time to do flight training. And I think flight training itself had a huge boom during the whole pandemic, even though airlines were kind of slowing down and whatever.
Yeah, and so, well, then, were you still working your other job when you did your flight training? I mean, I don't know how that happens during pandemic, but
Yeah, so I was just finished my sophomore year of college, and my parents
Oh.
lived in Austin, Texas. So I came down. They sent us all home, and I was like, all right, well, let's do this flying thing, but it'd be nice to make some money on the side. So I actually was working at a Chick-fil-A and getting my private pilot license.
Dude, that's so freaking. But you said, hey, this works out.
Yeah, it was really cool.
It.
Yeah, it was awesome.
Okay, cool. I'm gonna end up asking more questions about that Part 61 versus Part 141 because I've been doing a little research on that myself. Sure, there's a lot of questions over there.
Yeah, that was a big decision for me too. Was deciding between Part 61 or Part 141. Just kind of.
Yeah. Did you research that before you?
I did. I realized I wanted to get through this quick, and that led me to deciding with the Part 141 school because you're training almost every day, and there's always a surplus of airplanes, and a lot of instructors that work at these schools, and they have a lot more resources to help you kind of get through a lot quicker than a Part 61 school where they might have 1 or 2 airplanes or less instructors, something like that. So it all depends on what you want, though, because I wanted to do something quicker just to kind of get done with it so I can resume, working and resume my life.
I think that's interesting because I saw some comments on some other videos, and I see I think I was looking some things up, and there's a lot of mixed opinions about that, like what is faster or cheaper. That a lot of those factors go into it, and I think it tends to seem like, if I'm not mistaken, it's really about how you're getting each one and why you want to get it. I mean, if you want to be a commercial pilot as soon as possible, it seems like Part 141 is really the way to go.
Definitely.
I mean, did you got your Part 61 not knowing what you were going to do, right? It was for fun, right?
And so, and that's why too, there's less of a commitment up front and it's more pay as you go. But all the instructors and people I talked to was like, Part 61, you're going to get out of it what you put in. Like, you fly once a week, it might take you 2 years to get your private pilot license. But I was pretty committed to it, and I fell in love with it right away, so I was able to do it pretty expeditiously.
That's good.
But
and are you feeling that way too? Like, you feel you chose the right thing, it's going kind of fast?
I think so. I think a lot of it.
No, you're good.
I think a lot of the going fast is being able to stick with it, though, because you are flying once a day more than likely. Almost every day of the week you have ground classes you're going to. You have grounds with your instructor that you do on the side as well to kind of help supplement the ground training that you're getting. So there's definitely a lot going on in a Part 141 school. I think definitely for the career pilot aspiration, 141 is probably a good way to go because you get a good amount of knowledge from a lot of the training. You get a one-on-one with your instructor. You have a primary instructor. You fly the same guy every day, or same instructor every single day. Versus, I think if you kind of want to go be like a weekend warrior hobbyist pilot, then Part 61 is probably the way to go. You don't want to go through the whole 141 experience just to be a hobbyist pilot. But I think for the commercial pilot, airline pilot application, 141 is probably a good way to go. There's a lot of resources available to you at these schools.
Nice.
And to piggyback off something Tav said as well, kind of the downside too of paying as you go and paying for every hour, every minute of instruction that you get is when I was doing that whole Part 61 thing, I was feeling that as an external pressure of like every hour that I spend or every minute that I spend not getting something down, I'm paying for it.
Wow.
And it's a lot less stressful in a 141 environment where it's like, okay, this is, you're going to sign up, you're going to pay this amount of money and we're going to get you there.
Yeah.
And granted, it has its limitations or whatever, but for most reasonable students, it's more than enough and plenty to get it done. It takes that weight off your back of an already stressful training environment. If you had to add the financial responsibility of it too, that was an external pressure that it got to me for a second. I was like, this is way more than what I quoted my parents. They were helping me pay for it at the time. And it was like that frustration of leading up to my first solo and I couldn't get it down. I was like, I'm spending so much money. I can't do this. Like, should I just throw in the towel? Luckily, my CFI at the time, he had that like heart to heart with me and, got me to stick with it. And here we are now.
Oh, that's good. Yeah. And I hear it's kind of like luck of the draw at that point. Hopefully you choose a good person to go into that training with. Oh, that's good to hear. I didn't think about it that way. It's as if you pay for a 141 school and you have a win. You basically are just signed up at this point and it's about getting it done. It's not really like an hourly thing. It's more like, you show up and you do the work.
Exactly.
That means, and that's something I wanted to ask about too as a student. you're a part of thrust flight. How does it go? How do you prepare for things? Like, did you have a flight today? Oh, you did. You had the flight. Yeah. So what I'm wondering is, how do you prepare for flights? How do you study for things that are coming up? I mean, are you in a classroom? Are you partnering with your peers, or do you have your CFI? I just don't fully understand. I want to get a good image of that.
So there's quite a mix of all those things actually that you just mentioned. We do have ground classes at Part 141. That's the biggest difference between 61 and 141. It's more structured. We have the ground classes that we go to frequently. You go to the grounds, you study the material from that. Any deficiencies that you might have in the ground knowledge, you can also go over with your instructor or another friend. I think the nice aspect of having a 141 school environment was being able to make friends that you can study with that can help you. You can help them, kind of wherever you're lacking in knowledge, they're able to help pick up the slack in that. And you do the same for them too.
Is that something you find yourself doing quite a bit? Is that what you, I mean, you know what I mean?
Definitely,
You're not like a lone wolf out there?
No, I've even sent students of mine to go study with Tav because I know he's really sharp and can whip them into shape for me.
Okay, good. It's extra resources there.
Yeah, it's definitely help you kind of environment. Everybody wants to see their peers do well. Nobody goes through this on their own, I think. That was the biggest help for me, was finding a good group of friends. First day of school, they're my best friends at the school to this day. We studied for every rating together, got the whole program just about together. Wow. So definitely nice to have these resources available to you. And you have your instructor too that can always kind of supplement whatever gaps you might have in your knowledge.
Right, yeah, and I'm wondering like what kind of role does a CFI play at a school like this for their students?
Yeah, so I mean in general, when you're given a student, say Tav was my student going for his commercial license.
And when you say your student, are they like assigned to you? Like,
yeah,
primary?
I would be his primary.
Okay.
And so like some things I've done for Tav as well in the past is his primary is like primarily responsible for kind of training him as well as like guiding and managing him through that rating. In terms of like hitting all the lessons he needs to, making sure he's prepared for stage checks along the way. That kind of falls mostly on your primary before I see him for a stage check. And then, like he said, yeah, supplementing with ground if it needs it along the way. But he also at the same time will be enrolled in a structured ground class that's scheduled out for like 2 weeks where they have like a more typical school environment.
Right.
And then outside of that, it's kind of instructor's discretion on what the student needs, and you're able to provide that for them outside of whatever's previously planned.
That's good. That's cool to hear because I feel like myself personally, if I were looking into, hey, I want to learn how to do this, I want to learn how to be a pilot or at least fly a plane, I would be nervous because obviously I don't know anything, but that's a common scenario. And so you would think, oh, I sign up and I'm just kind of out here and I just kind of keep up and figure things out. But it's like you have a personal sponsor or someone to really like mentor you. That seems like really helpful. So
definitely an advocate for sure.
Yeah, that's good.
Not only that too, but also on that same kind of note, the primary instructor helps because they fly with you just about every single day. So they know where your deficiencies are, where you're strong in. So you don't have to go catch somebody up, back up to speed and say, okay, I need to work on X, Y, and Z. So because Cole already knew what I needed to work on.
Right.
He knew what we needed to put emphasis on versus the other things that he knew I was good at. We could just put those aside and I don't need to waste my flight time showing him the things that I was good on. Right. So he can help. He kind of knows what I'm going through and like what I'm needing help with, just so that
instead of like, it's more efficient that way because he already knows where you're at instead of you just floating around between different instructors. There is someone. I like the way you said it. It's kind of part of your responsibility to make sure that they do have the guidance.
Yeah.
It's not like, hey, why didn't you do it? You share responsiposability with the students you have. So
and here's a practical or real world example of how that looks today. There was some rainier, some more inclement weather today, so I couldn't fly with one of my students going through his commercial license, and the weather was looking better this afternoon. However, I was booked up with check rides and things like that. So what I had to do was advocate for the student because he needed to get a flight in before tomorrow. So I found another instructor that I trust. I caught him up to speed on everything like that and got him the flight that he needs. And, it was later in his program, so I've already kind of had the primacy of teaching him all these new things. So he knows how I want him to do it and everything. Yeah. He just needs to go with someone and make sure he's good to go before he takes his final stage check.
Yeah, that sounds like it's a good system to me.
I liked it.
Yeah, I guess that's one of the things I was really curious about, like how that relationship goes. And then I guess before we finish up with that, because I was going to ask you something else once I remember what it was.
It's okay.
But
It happens.
But yeah, how often do you meet with your primary CFI? Is there like a schedule, or is it just there every day when you go to school?
So typically the flight's scheduled in advance. I know, okay, today's Tuesday. I was supposed to have a flight this morning, but it was storming this morning, so I switched that to a sim and did that instead just to make sure I'm good with all my instrument skills in the sim. And you'll have a schedule every day. Typically, it's around the same time every day you'll fly. They kind of just fit you in the same block as every single day. Some days it is different. Other days you maybe fly with somebody else, but for the most part, you're flying the same instructor, and it's scheduled out in advance. You say, hey, I know my schedule this week. It's going to be 2 to 4, let's say.
Right. Okay. Well, then you both mentioned it too. That's actually good to hear about the scheduling and the fact that there's like a plan between going, like, when there's bad weather. That's what I'm wondering about a little bit is do you feel like weather is probably the biggest variable? Outside of that, it's just you, and then you just go about it, right? Do you feel like we have a good system for working around inclement weather?
Yeah, definitely. And I'll say too, one of the reasons I came to Thrust too and not gone to flight school in Michigan or Florida is, you can look at all these destinations of flight schools all around the world, and what school or what geographical area is going to have the most available flying days throughout the year.
Yeah.
In Texas, like Texas, Arizona, most of the southern states, it's pretty typically decent flying weather most all year round.
Yeah.
Whereas if I went to flight school in Michigan, pretty much from like November through February, I'd be shut down completely.
Oh.
Or like if there was any ounce of rain or water in the sky, I'm not flying pretty much.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of available flying days already, but in the event today or like this morning where there is inclement weather, we do have the flexibility of accomplishing stuff in the simulator as well as doing stuff with ground as well. Yeah. So there's always kind of options or things you can kind of flex into play in the event that, your primary task or whatever was kind of thrown off course by weather. So it's kind of, in weather in a sense, it's, it's unavoidable. We can't control it, but you can control where you go to school. And that's what I've told people as well. Like I had a good friend looking for flight schools, and he was looking to go back to Colorado. Yes, he had family there, but I was like, okay,
what's
probably
weather going to be like?
Yeah,
year round.
He's definitely going to have like I'd just be spitballing like 20% less available flying days or something like that.
Which makes a big difference over a span of a year or 2 or even 3 or 4.
Yeah,
depending on what kind of program you're in. Yeah, do you have family out here?
I do.
Because relocating can be hard, but I'm wondering if that plays a role in why you came to Dallas as well.
I have family here, and kind of like what Cole said, the weather's always generally pretty good here. You do get the bad weather days once in a while, but that happens just about anywhere you go.
Yeah.
Also, I think Dallas is a good place for flight training. We're spoiled for choice in terms of the amount of flight schools that are here as opposed to anywhere else in the country. There's a lot of options
as well as
here.
airline training.
Yeah.
Dallas is a big hub for a lot of airlines for airline training. Southwest, American, and there's a lot of big simulator training companies and facilities here as well that send a lot of their candidates to train here as well.
And what is that? Airline training. Okay, so what does that look like when you say airline training?
For like simulator training, like you get hired at a regional or any other carrier, and you got to do your airline transport pilot certificate, the ultimate license we're all chasing. Or you're doing your initial type rating training to fly whatever plane you're going to fly at the airline. A lot of that is centrally located in Dallas, right around DFW. Okay. So it's only like a 20-25 minute hop from here. Yeah. Which makes it easy.
I really want to hear stories if you guys have any stories about some of these things, because you said you moved, right? And then you've been, forgive me, what was it that you are working on now?
CFII, so teaching instrument to students now.
Gotcha. So you do have your CFI?
I do.
Okay, gotcha. But you're going through training still, obviously, as a student. So, and then after that, do you imagine you'll be looking for maybe even a job with Thrust Flight to
I'd like
continue?
to.
Okay, gotcha. The reason I ask is because, you've both flown quite a bit at this point. I wonder if you have any interesting stories about maybe a time when you were a little nervous, or you were caught off guard by a plane, or something didn't work out. Maybe a CFI had to save you. Just something. I like to hear like the ones that were a little scary, because pilots seem so confident all the time, and I'm like, well, when were you scared? Anything like that? I don't know.
Well, when you're scared, Cole.
You look like you have a story. You're laughing at
Probably flying with me, he was most scared.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, flying with Tav was always easy, and like you get once you're a CFI, you see, and you've been doing it for quite a while, you get to know most of the students pretty well. Like for the majority of my time here, I was working 7 days a week, almost 12 hours a day, most days. So I got to see all the faces and kind of get a gist for, where everybody's at and everything like that. And you get to know the students and know how they fly from talking to other instructors and things like that.
Yeah.
So he was always really easy. But there was actually a time when I was a new CFI back in last summer.
Okay.
So summer of 23. Yeah. So I was a new CFI and, it was actually a ferry flight. I was taking a student to a check ride up at our other location in Denison. And it was just normal VFR day where we took off out of Addison. And we're climbing straight out to the north to head toward the other airport. And we level off right around 2,500 feet once we're well north of the Addison airspace. And Addison was actually going through a runway change at the time. And so if you're unfamiliar, we always select and take off the runway with a headwind or whatever. So whatever runway the wind's favoring, because we always want to take off into the wind. And so the winds were shifting and they were shifting the runway and they call it the flow accordingly. And so while they were doing that, there were a bunch of planes just loitering out in just north of Addison, waiting for that runway shift to happen and for them to start going into the opposite runway. And so
out of traffic.
Yeah, that's kind of where we're headed. So everything was normal. And then all of a sudden, just out of nowhere, the plane didn't show up on any of our traffic collision systems or anything like that. Just out of nowhere, a plane buzzes right in front of our face at the same altitude and about, I don't know, I'm just guessing, but it was close enough for me to tell what kind of plane it was and tell you the colors of it. I subsequently, that's a situation that kind of shook me up, especially as a new CFI. It just kind of further stressed that, you can always be doing the right thing and always, be doing what you're supposed to, not breaking any rules or any FARs, and you still got to have your head on a swivel. And one of the biggest things I've learned from being a CFI is that at the end of the day, I'm responsible for that student, for this airplane, and for the safety of the flight. And while it shook me up, it was kind of one of those things with Maverick and Top Gun. You just got to get back in the plane and keep flying.
I guess so.
But yeah, stuff like that happens. It's aviation. It's never going to be completely 100% safe in every regard. So, you just got to do what you can to be the best pilot you can be and always be doing what you're supposed to, so that you can look out for others.
I think part of what makes aviation so safe, though, is that everybody that is in aviation typically does what they can to make it safe for everybody else, too.
Right.
Because it's only as safe as you make it, and it's one of the safest, mode of transportation and everything like that. It's definitely a lot of falls on the pilot responsibility and just kind of doing the right thing.
Yeah.
Some people just aren't, but that's kind of like what Cole was saying. You have to keep your head on a swivel. Similar thing happened to me, too. I was at another airport practicing landings as a brand new student, and somebody came in, not on our radar, no radios, nothing, and decides they're going to throw themselves in front of us and scare the living daylights out of my scared the living daylights out of me and my instructor, too. So that was definitely an eye-opener. She said, okay, this is why it's important to pay attention and use your radio, because you have a radio, so use it. Don't be the guy that doesn't use the radio.
Okay.
And it kind of ties hand in hand with Dallas itself. Dallas DFW airspace maybe is the busiest in the country. DFW is the second busiest airport.
Yeah.
But DFW airspace, because we have Love and DFW and all these other training airports, is some of the busiest airspace in the country. Yeah. And so it's great in the sense that, it really teaches you to be on top of radios and ATC communication and all those kinds of things right away. But also, it's just busy, and more planes you put in the sky, the closer they're going to be together.
Absolutely. Yeah, that makes sense. I actually hear that about even just being over here training in Addison. Anywhere you train in Addison, right? It's really nice because you have to actually deal with communications and using your radio a little bit more. And that's training that a lot of people seem to always have questions about after the fact. Yeah. So is that something you feel like is a great benefit here? Do you feel like that's going to...
Absolutely.
Do you talk to anyone from any other schools where you know any better?
Yeah.
I had friends in college that went through flight training. Very small airport, part-time control tower. no approach frequencies, nothing. And part of the biggest reason why I selected Addison as an airport to do my training at was because of how busy the airspace is. And yes, as a brand new student, your first day flying, it's very overwhelming. I'll be very honest with you. It was overwhelming to have to talk and so much and be listening and be on your keep your head on a swivel for your communication, hear your call out, and be on your A game almost. But also, I think that also makes you a better pilot, being able to have this experience from day one as opposed to acquiring that skill later on in your career, maybe at an airline. If you instruct at a small school that doesn't have a control tower, your entire 1,500 hours or 1,000 hours, whatever you're doing,
you didn't even get to do that.
You didn't get that experience that we get on a daily basis. You might get on a cross country every here and there, but Cole and I get that experience on a daily basis talking to approach. It's just part of what we do, and the calls eventually just become second nature. You're gonna hit the button. You're gonna know exactly what you're gonna say it like the back of your hand.
Nice. And I was lucky enough. I had that experience in my private training as well. I trained out of Austin Bergstrom.
It's a busy airport.
It's busier. It's a commercial airport, like Southwest, American, Delta, Spirit. Everyone's going in and out of there. And so not only you learn to be really good at radios, but also watch out for the big airplanes. You don't want to follow too close behind those guys.
Complex taxiing too.
Yeah.
As opposed to a couple taxiways and a runway.
Yeah. It gets you to form a lot of good habits right away. Especially, and so walking into Addison, it was definitely a transition. Everything was a little different, but I felt I was able to hit that in stride and then just get better and better with it the more I flew out of here.
What's it like being a CFI every day, including balancing that with your life responsibilities?
It was a grind, to be honest. At this point, I'm kind of at the tail end of everything, and I'm moving on to an airline next month. So kind of smelling the roses now, you could say. But I put my head down and worked. I saw the writing on the wall that was, flight time is what gets you where you want to go. So how are you going to get that? You're going to fly. You're going to work. And what I found from working at Thrust is, you show up, you do your job, you do it well, and you do it right, and you're willing to work, there'll always be work to be had. As a CFI, I averaged, it took me about a year and 2 days to get my flight time I needed to go to the airlines.
That's amazing.
And it was averaging around 100 hours a month. And, the few bad months we had, it's like 60, 80 hours. But if it's a good weather, like BFR every day month, I think it was like February or March, flew like 150 hours. And granted, that's not easy.
Yeah.
It's hard.
I would say I don't think that's not even close to average, right? That's pretty high up there.
Yeah, no, and because I kind of looked at it from this, I was like, hey, like, I just graduated. I had to take out, like most people, had to take out loans in order to pay for flight school, and you're not going to pay off flight school loans being a flight instructor. But you can once you get to an airline. So as soon as you can get there, and that's kind of how the whole program is modeled, is for those people that no more time to waste. Like, let's go.
Let's do it.
So I saw that and I was like, all right, I'm just gonna suck it up and work. And so it was a lot of long days in a row. But if you keep your head down and focus, is what kind of made it go by. And time went by really fast, actually. When you stay really busy.
Well, if you're staying busy, you don't have time to spend the money you're making at the right. And that's like outside of work. Well, so you stopped doing the job you had before. At some point, did you say you were pushing spreadsheets too? Or
I was a college student.
That's what I thought. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
So you're a college student, and then when you had to shut down, you come back home, and then hey, I need a little money. I'm working at Chick-fil-A. But did you imagine yourself going into it? Did you imagine yourself putting so much time in?
So I'm kind of like an OCD guy myself. Like whenever I'd get super interested or passionate in something, like I'd research the crap out of it. And so I got that private pilot license 2 years before I ultimately graduated and came here.
Okay.
So I had 2 years looking at, I was watching every instrument rating video known to man, because that's the next thing that comes after private. Trying to like hit the ground running as best I can. So I was looking at all those topics, seeing like what's next after everything. So I was kind of aware of what was to come. It's easy to just it's kind of daunting when you look at it. Like when you finish training at 200-300 hours, somewhere around there, you're like, shoot, I gotta that's the word for 5 times. Quintuple that.
Yeah, quintuple. Yeah, so that's good. Good word.
That's what I'm thinking right now.
But, you just keep your eye on the prize, and, each milestone kind of feels good, like 500, 750, 1,000, 1,250, and then before you know it, you're there.
That's freaking awesome, man. That's good to hear.
But I think that kind of went way off track of what your question was of what's life like as a CFI.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's part of it, because I wanted to know what it was like because you do have goals to get your hours. I mean, that's part of it, right? So and you came in here and you did work.
That's the thing with most all people too. Like, Thrust knows that as a company. We know that as instructors. Like, we're here, kind of as a means to an end in a sense. Yeah. And so they know that they're flexible with working with us when we have like airline interviews or things like that. Mm-hmm. But yeah, did you want to dig into more like day-to-day kind of stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I think I do a little bit. Actually I do before we move over, because I want to ask about, what it's been like for you to say, hey, I'm going to commit to this program as a student. But I am curious about your day-to-day stuff.
Yeah. So like depending on whatever schedule, lately my day-to-day it's kind of shifted as I've kind of been closing out my time here. Uh-huh. Since I'm a stage check instructor and a end of course examiner.
Yeah.
That's primarily what I do. So I don't have all these students and then I leave them all.
Okay.
That wouldn't be great. So I'm more in I'm just finishing up those guys and doing exams for other people, which is really cool.
Yeah.
Like not a half hour ago, I gave someone an instrument rating.
That's what I was wondering. Yeah.
Which is something that normally like was a job of DPEs and something that would take thousands and thousands and years of experience in order to do. And so we can do that for flight instructors, private pilots.
Is that because we have examining authority? Is that the difference there? And that's why, and that's another reason why a 141 has the power to get examining authority. Mm-hmm. And when we do, we're able to say, hey, you don't have to wait on a DPE, right?
Yeah, because it's way easier to make a check instructor or an EOC examiner than it is to become a DPE. And there's just more of us available too. Yeah. As flight training grows everywhere, the pace that new DPEs are made is just not going to keep up with the increased demand.
Yeah.
So it's a good way to circumvent that whole deal, and I think people have been, getting check rides way faster as a result.
Yeah. But also, not every school has examining authority to issue certificates, though, too.
Right. Yeah. Right, and we've had that for a while. Like I don't know how long. Do you know anything about? Have you had that since the jump?
I was one of the first few to go for instrument. And that was back in November.
They kind of came in segments. Yeah. Like the first one we had was CFI. I'm pretty sure.
I think so.
Because I was one of the you kind of have to do. You kind of select like 10 champions to go forth in ace through check rides.
Okay.
Nice. And then so we picked them up for each of those ratings.
Yeah. That's cool.
And
that's good to hear that you were able to give someone their instrument
it was cool.
certificate. I didn't realize that's how that even worked for a while.
Yeah, and my point in saying that too is it's like also it's doing the same thing every day. Mm-hmm. It can get mundane and run down. But what I found with Thrust is because we teach as CFIs, we teach all these different ratings. Like even if you're flight instructing all day, if you're teaching people in all these different ratings, it kind of breaks it up, makes it something fresh and new for you as a teacher. So it's not, all right, let's do slow flight for the 10th time of the day. As well as if I can break that up with doing exams and examining people, it's like, all right, I step into a slightly different role, put a different hat on, and now I'm an examiner. It's kind of like a job within a job.
Yeah, you have to move around a little bit and, like you said, not be mundane. Well, then to get more of a clear picture. So, first of all, do you eat breakfast in the mornings?
Depends.
You're like, what do you count as breakfast? Yeah, because I get donuts in the morning, and I'm gonna count that as breakfast. I'm
okay,
all right. Breakfast / dessert. I don't always eat donuts. But I was gonna ask you, what time do you get up in the morning, and what time do you have to be here, and then what time do you usually go home? Does that vary a lot?
Yeah. So yeah, it's all on your schedule. My schedule for the longest time was noon to midnight.
Okay. Yeah.
And that was like self-inflicted. Yeah. So that's not like what I was thrust in. Say, you got to work 12 hours a day.
Yeah. But you did that.
Yeah.
Because you got a lot of hours.
I guess I'm just a psycho. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, hey, maybe not, but that's good.
But when I was doing that, like, I'd wake up at like 10 a.m., something like that, 2 hours before I go to work, get caught up on paperwork and logging lessons, taking care of my own logbook after a day of flying a bunch of people, and then head in, we have to be here about 15 minutes prior to a lesson. I would typically get there earlier, and it depended if I was eating lunch with Tav that day or not.
Right. Okay, perfect.
Those lunches kept me alive during my flight training.
Yeah, we'd meet at the local Chick-fil-A every now and then.
So good. Sounds so good right now.
Yeah.
If y'all don't know what Chick-fil-A is, by the way, if you're listening from somewhere else, just know that you can't know until you come.
Yeah. Only in Addison, Texas.
Yeah. We're not getting paid for that either.
No,
Hopefully we're allowed to say
not.
that. This is not a sponsorship, but if you want to sponsor. Well, then that's good because I want to know about the students. I don't know if y'all's schedule varies as much as a CFI's does or what it looks like for you to commit. But I'm wondering, you know, what's it been like for you to say, hey, I really want to get through this program. I want to do a good job here, and I want to be present.
So when I started my pilot training, we had ground class at 6 a.m. That's just how the instructor schedule lined up. So we'd go to ground, and then I had a flight at, I believe it was at 8:30. That was typically every day. I'd go to ground, then have a flight right afterwards. And then in my mind, I was already awake. I was already at school. I went to my class. I flew a plane already. I might as well stick around the school and study a little bit, kind of get ahead on the next day's reading or do whatever I needed to do to make sure I was on top of the ground knowledge. Look over the maneuvers guide and make sure that I know what I'm doing procedurally before I go in the plane the next day. You know, so if one thing wasn't going so great in my flight one day, I could always go back, read the maneuvers guide, read the airplane flying handbook on that stuff, and just kind of make sure I'm getting ahead of both my ground knowledge and my flying skills. Yeah. So that was a good, I think, what's what I'm looking for. It was a good routine to kind of get into because that kind of built the foundation for the rest of my flight training. So you almost kind of dedicate time out of your day to not only come to school for your ground class or when that's over just for your flights, but just kind of come to school and study and, you know, be with your friends, make it a social event. That was the best thing that I think we did.
Would you say that's a piece of advice even
Definitely.
For someone joining? Because without that, it seems like you wouldn't. I could imagine it'd be hard to be plugged in and learn and study.
Yeah, definitely on your own it's difficult. Make it a social event. Find some good friends that you are cool with hanging out with outside of school too. But you know, you come to school, hang out. Hey guys, what time are we meeting today? Oh, let's be there at 10. And, you know, we'd sit there, we study for a couple hours, and you know, maybe go get lunch.
And Tav's a great example of a student that, you know, takes that to heart. And what I've always told students and people I've done discovery flights for too, where they're coming to check out the school, see if they like it, things like that, is I always tell them I haven't seen anyone not be successful and get everything they ever wanted out of this program if they were doing those things and taking the initiative of coming to school, studying with others, being here, being present. Treat it like a job or like like for me, it was like grad school, and I bet for Tav, kind of similar. But if not that, think of it as your college, and you know how much time would you dedicate to something like that? You know, it's not just the 2 hours a day you show up to fly or for your ground class. You know, there's hours of studying and work that go in outside in order to make those flights and those lessons as advantageous as possible.
It's definitely what you put into it. I think you get back out of the, what is the saying? You reap what you sow.
Yeah,
it's definitely what you definitely get out what you put into it, and it's definitely helpful to kind of have that good foundation of studying with friends and making sure everything's being taken care of.
You're all here for the same reason, right? You all want to get somewhere with this. You want to make a living out of this. I mean, you wouldn't be here if you weren't, because it's a commitment from the jump. So that's good to hear that. Well, do you guys do anything outside of work or student life? I mean, we
went and looked at planes the other day.
Hey man, different planes than what we have here, right? I hope.
Yeah, when we're not flying airplanes for ourselves, we went to DFW Founders Plaza. Cool spot if you're ever in the Dallas area, by the way. Yeah, go check it out.
I've never been.
I was begging Cole to go at some point, so we finally went. Go watch the airplanes come in, landing at DFW, kind of keeping your eyes on the prize. Good weather day. Yeah. Just go hang out, enjoy the day. I kind of touched on this earlier, but the lunches with Cole definitely got me through the beginning part of my flight training.
Yeah, because it kept you plugged in, or you got a breather after when you want to go eat.
Yeah, just meet up not at the school. You can take a breath and not be so focused on school. You can kind of just catch up as friends as opposed to, I want to talk to you, but I got to run. I'm between check rides right now.
Right.
In Cole's behalf, we'll be between two check rides. I'll try to corner him to talk, but he's a busy guy.
I would say
I should be studying too.
I do try now, especially, you know, take time out of your day. And I've heard the same advice from a lot of other podcasts and people in aviation. When you're going through sort of a longer term training school or something like that, you got to have something outside of aviation to be your time to decompress. Yeah. And for me, that was going to the gym or playing hockey. I grew up playing hockey. And so that was always a good outlet for me, to just take your mind off of it for a little bit, because it allows you, because you can get so lost and deep in the weeds if you're just reading federal aviation regulations for 8 hours.
Gosh.
Like, if you can step away and, you know, like refocus your mind and then come back to it, kind of can give you a fresh perspective. And to keep chugging on.
That's one reason why I asked the question, because I mean, like, there's been situations where there's something I'm doing, something I'm really into. I'm similar. Like, I do a lot of research when I get into something. I want to figure out what I'm getting myself into, and how to be good at doing it. And you always end up needing something else going on, something to check out into, check out of, and then to check into. And that's why I kind of ask. So even if it's just like literally going and getting lunch, I mean, that makes a big difference.
Oh yeah.
And I know, even as a student, like I said, y'all are committed. Y'all are really committed. So I wanted to know what that meant and what that kind of looked like to take a break.
And one thing that's kind of helped me too as an instructor is, like, Tav and I like, while we'd have a working relationship as instructor and student, I'd also call a lot of students I've had my friends, and I've tried to stay in touch with as many as I can.
It helps
throughout the time, and it's honestly like it's your first start of building like your network in aviation. I still talk and catch up with my first instructor, he's a Southwest pilot now, but I still check in and give him updates on like where I'm at on my journey and everything like that. It's kind of like the start of your, aviation family in a way, that branches out from you, because it's something crazy. Like when
they made you a pilot.
Yeah.
Thinking about that's the coolest thing.
That's a connection.
Shout out to all my instructors. Like they made me know how to fly now.
Yeah. It's good.
But like from like networking, I just remember I saw like this crazy thing. Like you go 2 jumps for like a person who knows a person. And then you can be connected to anybody in the world. And aviation being a tight knit community too, like it's even more helpful.
Our world gets small quickly when you're within a community. Aviation does seem like it has like a strong sense of community in general. So I can imagine that. I mean, I'm a dancer. I dance.
Okay. I took a hip hop.
That on the internet.
I took a hip hop class when I was 8.
Hey man, I'm sure it was fun. I might have thought that, maybe not, because I'm probably not older. But I just think that it's cool to think about it that way as a community. That's what I've been picking up from these conversations, whether it be in school or in the industry, right? And I guess one piece of advice from each of you, if you hadn't already given enough advice, for someone who's thinking about coming here, and whether it be thinking about coming here or once they start.
Definitely do it and do your best.
Yeah.
If you're thinking about it, just do it. I thought about it for a long time, and I'm really glad that I did. I came here, ultimately found a good community. I'm really happy both with the schooling the education that I'm getting, and with the people that I'm surrounding myself with. We kind of talked about it earlier, but aviation is a very tight community. Everyone loves the same thing, so that's a pretty unique aspect of it as well. But if you're gonna do it, put your heart into it, because it's a grind till you get to the side that Cole's on, where you're actually instructing students.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that. I do want to hear what Cole's piece of advice is. If he hadn't already given us plenty of advice, maybe one final piece of advice that says, hey, here's how to go about being a new student at any school, let alone thrust flight.
Yeah, and I did want to add, for my piece of advice, is that I found thrust not through before, like we really had ramped up social media and marketing like that. So it wasn't like I watch an aviation video, then I see a thrust ad or something like that. Yeah. So I found thrust through my first ever instructor, who went to thrust for his CFI academy. And that's been something throughout time that we've been really renowned for. And something I'm grateful that I was able to go through is our flight instructor academy that's taught by a lot of ex-airline and pilots with a bunch of experience, giving their lessons to you as a flight instructor. So I found thrust through that, checked it out, and it was as advertised. So I was like, this sounds great. But my advice to everyone out there looking at potentially going to flight school is, definitely do your research and find what's right for you. But also that once you start and get on your journey, never take a lesson, whether it be good or bad, or someone you fly with, for granted. In a sense, there's always someone who knows more or is more experienced, and there's always someone to learn from. And I've kind of taken that to heart, is that everyone I fly with, whether it be Tav or another instructor, Tav is an instructor, but whether it's just a student pilot, someone who doesn't even have their license, or even a discovery flight, cherish that time with them. And if you can pick up one thing from that person, It'll make you a better pilot overall. I kind of see myself now as a collection of all the different students and instructors that I've ever flown with, and taking all those good bits of information or good experiences and moments from each of those lessons, and holding on to those. And you're never gonna fly with your best friend every day, so but even from people that you may not get along with or may not enjoy, you can still learn something and get some value out of it. You'll be better off overall.
I see everything as an opportunity, and don't take anyone for granted, because you never know what you're going to be able to get out of them and how they're going to be able to help you in your learning and in your career. Like you said, it's a close-knit community. You're going to know a lot of people, and then once you start getting into the industry or even entering the industry, I'm sure it's going to benefit you more to have positive relationships. So that sounds good.
Just to tag on, always say never turn down a good opportunity, and don't burn any bridges. Because it is a small knit community.
You heard it from Cole. You can't burn bridges when you're flying. Trying to make bad jokes here. It's not working out. Okay. Well,
don't throw stones in a glass airplane.
Yeah. Thank you. We got more. How do you fly conversation? Okay, I'm done. Thank you for joining us. This is Zach again with Tav and Cole. Thank you guys for joining us.
Thanks for
I'm
having
sure
us.
we'll see you guys soon around the campus. And hopefully everyone's listening to this episode later on, whether it be on Apple Music or Spotify or YouTube. Please, if you did enjoy the conversation, I do implore you to at least subscribe to our YouTube. But if you're actually interested in hearing more about aviation, let alone thrust flight, do visit thrustflight.com. We have a lot of great information. Even give us a call. If you've never been in a plane yet, I just went on my first one recently. My first plane ride was kind of crazy. That's out today. But what I wanted to say is that take a discovery flight. See if you even like being in a plane. You might fall in love, and you might see us soon. So we'll see you on the next episode of Pilots Say What, where we hear what pilots have to say.